the Wallabies and their ongoing series with the French. And we are delighted to report, as if you didn't know, that the series has been levelled after the French made a stunning 28-26 win over the Wallabies in Melbourne, in AAMI Park in Melbourne. A late kick from Jaminet,
who was excellent
between
all
the
day
posts after a sensational last minute scrummaging penalty against the head from Demba Bamba off the bench, destroying Angus Bell, sending him to another planet, and winning the game for the French at the death in another brilliant test match, 28-26. What a game.
Oh, it was an awesome game, absolutely. From the opening whistle, it was just all action, Corabetti crossing the line twice. Pints out to him by both Wright and Tamua for just butchering his lovely tries. Like, the man is lethal. He should have been on the board, but it wasn't to be. And then ultimately it was Pinot who got the opening score with a nice sequence from the French as well. And that was kind of emblematic of how it went. The French were just a little bit more clinical and a little bit less sloppy, and it ultimately told in a 2-point advantage at the death on the scoreboard. But there was great qualities from the Wallabies even in that first half. Pass from Tupou at the base for the Gordon try.
Great pass,
awesome, great to see from a tight head. Dante was awesome on D as well all day for France, and he's
the breakdown is where they won it. That's where they won the game. The French, they just tortured the Wallabies. The Wallabies were trying to play this Rennie ball. It was high tempo, it was quick tap penalties, it was kicks to the corner, it was go for tries. I think Hooper even referenced it at full time, but the French backed their D, and their D got it done for them, most specifically just at that breakdown area. Just one too many times the Wallabies got themselves isolated, and the French were just lethal over the ball, and that was the difference in that first stanza. They ended up, the Wallabies were probing more so than the French. The French attack was rather stagnant and kick heavy, in fact. And then the Wallabies were just not able to get in, not able to convert. The French were able to kick over a couple of cheap pens, and then they struck in a mad fashion, really, just with a loose pass that went backwards that fractured the Aussie line, and then all of a sudden it was that easy. Bob's your uncle Pinot
with his first touch in the first 2 games, and he grabs a try.
It was definitely good from his point of view. Wokey was involved there as well. Wokey was awesome all day long.
It was exactly him delivering on the promise that we see at club level. His first showing in a French shirt that shows what he's about.
That was exactly it. I've been promising a lot from the man who hasn't been delivering for the past year, but I do see him as a future starter for France, perhaps for many years to come. And I was delighted to see that he finally really showed who he can be. And it was awesome.
Line-out steals and the breakout, the exit in the second half that had him shrug
off
two.
The back of a
line-out steal, then shrug off 2 defenders in your own 22, then find Villiers, who finds Kuyu, who streaks up, and that was a big moment when the Wallabies were driving to get back in, and they repelled them. And they did that twice. They bundled out Lachlan Swinton, or not Lachlan.
No, he's not team.
Lackey Lonergan, different Lackey Lonergan. They bundled him out in a late maul as well, where they just peeled to the wrong side, and he was a bit slight there in the end. But again, it was just smothering French D at set piece. It was an awesome game, and it was a deserved win for France ultimately, because there was no mucking around with getting it off the pitch when time was up this time either. But guys like Jaminet, who had that howler at the end of the last game, who was awesome, kicked all of his kicks, some of them difficult ones, had a beautiful counter-attacking
20 points from the tee of Jaminet, 20 points over the bar,
and some really good general play.
23, excuse me, because they scored 28, they just had the one try.
That's right.
Everything else came from the boot of Jaminet, and they stuck with him after last week, and he did deliver, certainly from the tee, but he was also good in the loose as well. And they just they got on top of the Wallabies and owned the referee battle, really, in the penalty battle, and were just more clinical. The Wallabies were going to corners, the French were repelling them.
Off the bench was mighty as well. Some of the impact they were able to unleash was big, really big. Like, even down to the last play, lovely slide tackle from Iribarin and a jackal steal from Makalou, and it's like both guys, really good guys, coming in off the bench, and that's what this
Makalou was huge. France, another breakdown terrier.
It
was all about Sean Edwards for me as well. There was a different kind of defense where they spread the width across the width of the field, got up in the French faces, but then just really assaulted the breakdown and picked their moments when the Wallabies were isolated. Never got too narrow, never slipped many tackles, and owned that area. And it was a magnificent performance, really.
There were a few from France's point of view, obviously magnificent. From Aussie point of view, disappointing. I know there's all kinds of rattles being thrown from prams, but there were good moments and bad. The Michael Hooper try to get them back into it, to make it a 2-point game with 5 minutes to go was an absolutely great try. Terrific little break. Good touch from Kellaway in there. He managed to find its way through Jaminet's hands and then ultimately to Hooper to dot down. So that was a good positive. Tamua was a negative. I was doing play-by-play notes, and it was like on where was it? It was at 20 minutes or 30 minutes that I had like 3 bad errors in the first, or 3 shockers in the first 30 minutes. That's right. And then on 31 minutes he had an inexplicable drop, so it was 4. He was really poor again, and it was going to what we're saying. It's like there's a lot of faith in him. They seem to think it's like, okay, well, you have an inexperienced Lolosio and we're not our ideal halfbacks, so what do you do in the centres? We have a lot of talented centres, but obviously we're picking Tamua, so which talented centre do we pick? And it's like, pick 2 of them and drop Tamua, please.
I don't want to be too harsh on the bloke, but he was all over the place, and he's a problem in there. He's very slow. He doesn't stick the passes that he needs to make. He's just not quite cut out for this level, and he tries to be that second distributor, but the quality isn't there, and everything, like even his season highlights in a regular season club format, they're all quite slow, and I don't for a veteran as well, I just don't love his temperament either. He's playing 12. Like, there was one particular, among a sequence of red zone butcherings that they did.
Yeah,
there was one. I mean, I don't hate necessarily when he tries to whip the ball wide and it goes forward. I mean, it sucks that he can't stick that pass, and that pass kind of does need to be thrown, and JOC is kind of the man they want doing it, but he's not there. But the one that really irked me was towards the end of the first half, when he got the ball in a sort of a 12 hit up mould, and the French defence came flying up on the outside. Pinot came shooting up, and there was nothing there. I mean, he was either crash into 2 French defenders or nothing else. But what he actually did was threw a pullback pass to Lolosio that was just not on, with Pinot in his face, to his toes.
Yeah.
And it was just like, Lolosio's the guy on debut, you're the veteran in here helping him. Why are you shoveling that pass? You've got 12 on your back. This is dirty ball. Hit it up, please, and keep the game going. And he just lacked the composure, really, time after time in that game to do that. And he was a sticking point for part of the reason their attack didn't work.
Yeah.
But it did go beyond that. I mean, I just thought the French defence were all over them. They were unlucky in moments as well. Like, you look at that Corbett try, and then it turned out Wright knocks it on.
The little
right
elbow
shocker.
Right, it hasn't happened for. I like Wright a lot, but this Test series has not really gone his way. It's just nothing really has come off for him, and down to that, like an oblivious glancing elbow he didn't even realise, that then scrubs off a beauty of a Corbett try.
Yeah, and they didn't manage to replicate that try. You know, they did show good hustle to get back into the game, to get that try before half time through the Tupou pass. They outscored the French then in terms of tries, because they got that second half score.
Yeah, Michael Hooper, great score.
It was a great
and it was
score
from the middle
back
third was where that came from. In the clutch moment, it wasn't a red zone attack.
No.
It was a beautiful sequence of Wallaby rugby from the middle third.
Yeah, they couldn't deal with the breakdown pressure, and they couldn't break the French down in the red zone, and they tried one too many times. Although they did manage to get back up and get a lead, and then have a scrum.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for Angus Bell, Demba Bamba just was hunting for him, and he didn't know it. And there goes the penalty, and so goes the game.
Maybe that's the downside. We were saying it about the Springboks coming back into the Rugby Championship, but the French are a similar beast in terms of scrumming acumen. Like the Super Rugby domestic, in which they're obviously playing amongst each other, and then even the Trans-Tasman, where they're exposed to Kiwi Rugby, which is shocking, and they weren't able to deal with the open field play. But very often in those tests, and even in Bledisloe, as we've said before, you see them just kind of nearly like the front row union will just shake hands and we'll just lock the scrum down, and it'll go in and go out, and it's like, that's not the case. And especially in a thing like that, I mean, he's a young man, Bell. I'm not going to go in on him on that, but Demba Bamba was hunting for him, and he should have been expecting it, because it was kind of a last ditch play from a tight head like that. It's like, I'm going to try and win this against the head. Yeah, you've got to kind of do better.
There was no one scrum hustle, but I would say that I think Tupou and the Reds pretty much take care of that from a club rugby point of view. They do have dynamic scrum factors at play.
And actually, to be fair, they won a penalty not through Alatoa as well. He won a scrum pen when he came on as well, so it wasn't like they weren't scrum.
No, it was just that clutch scrum.
Like clutch scrum, last chance saloon for France. You have the game, you have the lead. You need to just try and lock that one down. So that was obviously unfortunate for Bell, but fabulous from Demba Bamba. He had been a little loose in his showings in the loose when he came on, but it's like all of that is erased and some, because he's a tight head. Yeah. What is a tight head's job?
Scrummage, and he won the game and Jaminet with the boot as well. But very interesting game, won by the French defence. and great they great ability to kick the ball off at the end there from the French as well.
Yes,
they have learned.
Showed a really good victory formation setup towards the end. They'd obviously worked on it all
Honestly,
week.
it was better than the Springboks, which you wouldn't have called. The Springboks were looser on the ball out play.
That's true.
But that was a mighty showing from the French, and it sets up a phenomenal.
We have the final test coming up. Like it is at Suncorp, which is where the Wallabies want it, but it's a series decider, and it's just that's fantastic news. That's exactly what this series needed for the intrigue. It's obviously, if it was France getting their first win since 1990 or whatever, so 30 plus years, so all of that history there, but now it's an opportunity for them to make a series win, and then conversely for the Wallabies, it's a chance to stop the rot as far as Series L's at home to Northern Hemisphere teams, and they're at Suncorp, their fortress, they'll be bullish to try and do it.
It's among the many games taking place tomorrow. It's taking place obviously Saturday, along with the rest of the games. 8 p.m. local time kickoff. That's 11 a.m. in our country, in Ireland and the UK. But that among a pantheon, right in the middle of a pantheon of footy that's going on tomorrow. And as you say, just sets up a brilliant series. I mean, the Wallabies do need to stop this rot. They have this losing record now at home against these Northern Hemisphere sides in these series over the last few. Like, this is a great opportunity for them to do that, given the way the first test went, where they were lucky to get out of jail, and then arguably they were unlucky to lose the second test because they probably played the more industrious footy, just got beaten at the breakdown, but that's the way it goes. They will be determined to win this one. I mean, a loss here does look a little weak. Like, it just makes them look behind the French, and even without Dupont and the pressure would be coming on ahead of Bledisloe, which is less than ideal.
That's true.
A win feels important, but then a win feels like a massive opportunity for this French team to get some silverware, and this is legit silverware. I think a series win
in the Southern Hemisphere,
it counts along with like a Six Nations win. I would certainly count it among like Ireland's achievements when we went and won a series over there. That's a big achievement for any squad of players.
Yes, it is,
and would set them up mighty going into next season, and it would be a real stepping stone. Like, this is a trophy that we've won. That's tangible. I think this is a huge stepping stone for the French, and they look like they've earned it.
They do, and there's a bit of kind of wishy-washy chat from Aussie media that I see about can't even beat a France C team, which is misguided, because like it's just an alternate France team, really. Like, these players are top quality, and in some ways they're performing better than the main guys. Like, the glaring example is the kicking game. The kicking acumen of the guys who started in the Six Nations is not as good, and therefore they didn't exit as well. Like,
exactly, they had like Ntamak, Dupont and Dulin in the main kicking roles. All very fine players in their own right. All can make a case for themselves as the test starters. I think certainly Dupont is straight in there, but
could use a better kicking scrum half than Dupont.
Exactly, what they didn't have is the balance to exit, and yet with this team, even though Carbonell hasn't been great, and I think they were right in getting rid of him as we look in the squads at the moment. I think getting a guy like Jaminet in, getting Kuyu's boot. The kicking game has been resolved, and you would wonder, it's food for thought for a French coaching staff. Like, they have oodles of talent, a bit like England and South Africa, and now they have the French C team is putting out performances that are as good ultimately when everything's put together as the French A team with all of these stars. They're going to have a serious thought about what their first team is and who needs to get in. Just, they have the quality. Let's not worry about getting the best players out necessarily. They're all good players. Let's get the right balance so that we can play a well-rounded game.
That's always the challenge. As opposed to most nations, as we said before, trying to scramble together the best players for the job for the 31. For nations of the size of France or England or South Africa, it's more about like the pitfalls are picking the wrong heads or leaving guys at home because you have so many. Like, 31 is narrowing it down. Some of these tier 2 teams are having to call guys out of retirement just to get 31 on the plane. Like, that's not the case, and sometimes the Wallabies are like that as well. Like, a little bit of their depth has been stretched by the absence of their primary halfbacks from last season as well, and obviously you've seen a little bit of that too. But to brand this France team as a C team in a disparaging way for your own team is folly. Really,
this is about what I would
test series.
This is about what the French would do. It's about what the main French guys would do. I think against the Wallabies over the first first two tests. They'd be better in some areas and worse than in others, but the balance is very similar.
True.
And that Edwards defence just seems to be a rock, that regardless
and
of personnel.
It was the same in Automations
change.
Cup when they changed personnel. It's the uniformity to their defensive structure and their tigerishness.
If anything, it's the first thing they dial in
when
they get a new bunch of heads in, and it's not quite the same group. The first thing they dial in is the defence. He's switched. It's been a light switch moment since he's come in, as everyone knew it would be. One of the great.
He's got a great track record for doing just that. So definitely, I just want to pour water on that point of view, because it's nothing but rubbish chat to try and knock the Wallabies and cheapen it's a real test series. What is a real test series? It's kind of hedging your bets. It's like, oh well, if we lose, we're just rubbish, and if we win, we only beat a France C team. It's all of that chat is rubbish. None of it makes sense, and you're disparaging what has been a fantastic series. So we have no time for that kind of conversation in this one.
And we have a brilliant, thrilling final fixture here, which is no doubt going to be class. And again, the Suncorp record is put on the line, and it rarely lets them down.
It's true.
We're going to look at just first of all the squads. The two teams have been named for this one, which is pretty exciting. And there's a couple of changes each way. In fact, we rattle through just the Wallabies have gone with the same front. No, they haven't. They put Tupou on the bench, and they've actually brought Ulese back in for Lachlan Lonergan to cover hooker. Which makes sense because Lonergan. Oh no, not Lachlan Lonergan.
Lackey.
Is that no? It is Lachlan Lonergan. Sorry.
Yeah.
He's out because he was struggling out there, and Ulese gets a chance. They've gone with Phillip. They moved Phillip to the bench. They've gone with Darcy Swain and Salakai Loto.
Also makes sense from a short turnaround rotation, attritional positions kind of place.
And they've also moved Valentini to the bench as well.
More heft to come in.
More heft, and brought in Lockie Swinton, who is this bulldozing tigerish number 6 to match the likes of Cretan, and I think it could be a prudent move in this game. He could soften up the French pack at the end of their season
and all of that.
He just needs to mind his tackle height.
He's another one of these guys with the kind of top heavy shape, big frame, big shoulders, who doesn't always like to dip or duck or dive before tackling. Sometimes he just likes to tackle, and if he gets that wrong, that can be a red card. And even if Kernsey or whomever is saying, oh, it shouldn't be a red, it should be a red, and so he should get that height down. But beyond that, he's very physical, big unit.
They've done the correct thing and taken Gordon out for Tate McDermott. Their form scrummy. Gordon hasn't done enough. In moments he's been good.
Grabbed the try all right. It was a good little peel. It seemed to be a pre-planned little thing because Tupou kind of surprised everyone with the pass, but it didn't surprise Gordon, who kind of peeled out and found his way on the wing. Seemed like a good way to unhitch, but it wasn't enough really. No, he hasn't done quite enough, and he's been outplayed by Kuyu on the opposite side.
He wasn't bad. He wasn't the problem by any stretch, but he wasn't doing enough, and I think McDermott offers a little more.
Certainly more tempo.
Nice Irani also comes in at 8.
Good player too.
Exactly.
Decent back row stocks.
Wilson I believe is injured, so he's out of the reckoning for this one. And then they've also gotten rid of Tamua, as we called for, as makes sense, and gotten the inform.
Gotten rid of is a strong claim.
Well, he's on the bench. They moved him to the bench, but they've gone with Paisami and Ikitau, which is the correct centre partnership
currently, with Pataya to come back in.
And fight for it, because Ikitau looks in quality form, and Paisami is more of a 12 and can get more stuck in that department. Ikitau can be that distributor, and he's also a threatening runner, so I just think there's a better balance to that. Class on the wings. Tom Wright leaves, he wasn't doing enough. Corabetti on one wing, Dengunu on the other.
Dengunu getting his chance in this test series, he's exciting too. Needs no introduction.
They stick with Tom Banks at fullback, and crucially, just looking at the bench, obviously there is Tamua. Reece Hodge comes in as well. Gordon drops there, but just noticeably in terms of the explosive forward impact, they have now gone with Tupou, Phillip and Valentini to come on in the dynamic loose roles.
In the dying embers of this test series, they're going to be unleashing that. So that is definitely tactical, and it makes good sense. Tupou is phenomenal starting or off the bench, but I can see what they're thinking with that kind of stacking of the bench from a forward point of view. Conversely, France, they've also made a few changes. We have Forletta, I think, coming in at the front row. Forgro and Falatia as well on the other side. Sticking with barrel-chested Barlow. He is an awesome unit at 2. Then Kazo and Taufi Fanua getting the start. Taufi Fanua was monstrous off the bench. They're looking for him to deliver that kind of impact from the opening whistle this time. Cretin, Jalanche and Woki, which is fast becoming a very well settled combination.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Cretin is awesome, and then you've got like Olivon and Aldrit as well as options once they get their full squad back. They're going to have the back row by committee could be an option as well with all of those stocks, but consistency for the moment, and that's pretty world class, is there as well.
It's true. Jalanche will captain the side from number 8 this time as well, I think, so fair play to him. Kuyu and is it Kostov is his name?
Anton Hastoy, and he plays for Poo. He's a 24-year-old who came through the I call them Poo disparagingly, which is unfair. They're
especially when you're bigging up their new fly half.
This is the Pow. They've been playing in France now for a number of years, and they're an established top couture's club who I should stop insulting. And they're one of the few clubs you meet who wear green as well. So
that's true. Yeah, you should be getting on board. And they signed Ben Smith once upon a time.
Yeah, so, he hasn't appeared for them too much, but this guy broke into the teams. They're starting fly half, a decent all rounder, came through their academy, and they just decided to give him a shot. I mean, Segond was the other guy who actually also is Spanish qualified, but he wasn't doing enough towards the tail end of the season, and I definitely think giving this guy a shout, who I haven't seen much of because I haven't seen much of the top couture, but I've seen him play 1 or 2 games.
And look pretty good.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how he goes.
Like, I'm starting to run the clock. Like, unless he finds amazing form, but Carbonell was not impressive in the opening 2 tests, and he was firmly third behind Entamac and
I would take Cleason over Carbonell right now. I think he needs to be put on the back burner and really it's one of these things where he plays for too long.
Cleason and now him, so
exactly.
It's tough.
He plays behind a pack that is as monstrous. Probably the most monstrous pack in the top coutures, and that's why he can look good at times. And I know he was decent in the under-20s, but again, it was behind a monstrous pack. He's just a little slight, and he's not.
Same caveats we attach to when people are bigging up the likes of Ross Byrne for us. It's well, Leinster dominate every game they play, and he gets an armchair ride, and it's like, it's different when it's in Twickenham, or in Suncorp.
He's young yet, but he's struggling under pressure, and I don't think he's quite there yet. So this guy gets a chance. It's a bold call from a French point of view, bringing a new 10 in for
it's less bold than it is for other nations because it tends to be the 9.
It's true.
And Kuyu has been brilliant, has been fantastic.
And there was no fear of him being dropped.
It's close to having him on the bench now. Now I know there's Saran and other people, but I would nearly have him right up there because because of that kicking acumen. It's something different from Dupont, and he exits cleaner. He has a much crisper right boot, a more educated right boot than Dupont. Not the same running game, not the same running threat, but still a very, very fine scrum half, as France do have an abundance of. And then the centres, we have Vincent and Barassi actually coming in as well for Dante. So Dante had a very fine series, but obviously still rotating as well. And then the back 3 is just, I like this back 3 a lot. Teddy Thomas on one wing, Damien Pinot on the other, with Jaminet, who has been awesome. Last 20 minutes of first test notwithstanding, very impressive showing from a guy who hasn't even played top couture's rugby yet. He's the top scorer in the Pro Tour.
Well, he will, and he looks well able. Absolutely. There's some quality on the bench as well, but they also do have, to be fair, some young guys, and this is kind of intriguing. They have 23-year-old Stade Francais lock Azago and 24-year-old Montpellier open side Bekongyi. I probably butchered both of them, but they both come in on the bench. They're going to be lining up against the likes of Valentini and Phillip and Tupou coming on fresh, and it'll be telling how deep does the well go in France. The answer is very deep. Is it endless? Haven't seen these guys before. It'd be very interesting to see if they can mix it at this level. They also just have Boutier covering 10, which is interesting, obviously with his big boot. I suspect they're trying to give the young 10 a go, and they could even move Kuyu in or Iribarren in if they need to.
Something like that, I think so.
Plenty of options for France, but a little bit of inexperience on the bench, which might worry you.
True enough.
We're going to look at now the game itself, just from the point of view of each teams. What adjustments are they going to make ahead of this third and final test? Starting with the hosts, the Wallabies, who are obviously under major pressure now at home in Suncorp. One of the key adjustments just from that game is make the pressure count on the scoreboard. And there's an interesting philosophical question. Like they were playing some really good Dave Rennie rugby. They were hitting sharp lines. They were keeping the pace of the game frantic and accelerated. and they were getting like 3, 4, 5 excellent phases going and just not quite finding the last play, and then they got turned over. And France, by contrast, were getting cheap penalties off them and just pointing them, and that was the difference. They weren't like, they were going to the corner, setting up those red zone attacks. I certainly wouldn't change the game plan in the middle third. I thought they looked good in the middle third. I thought they were unlucky not to score. Corabetti crossed the line. They had many line breaks. I think they were getting to the extremities quite well.
True.
I think the presence of Ikitau is only going to improve them in that vein.
You
can have Paisami picking those sharp lines. You can have Paisami picking lines off Ikitau.
All of that.
Also the blindside wings coming
There's
in.
just more space to attack from the middle third. Whereas in the red zone, it's tougher. And France's tenacious defense and Sean Edwards and all of the hands that are in the ruck invariably, and it's going to be tougher from that close. Take the threes on. Convert.
Take that Edwards D out of the game.
It's been costing them now for not just this test series. It cost them a little bit in the Tri Nations last year as well, as just not making good sequences of play count on the scoreboard, and that's going to be a difference. And when you've stacked your bench, as we were alluding to, with that kind of impact for the last quarter, and couple that with the fact that they have finished the stronger in these games, in both of these games, then the French side,
in the mix.
Stay in the mix, kick your threes, channel your inner Springbok, kick three, defend well,
back yourselves to come on strong when you're unleashing Tupou on a tired French team in their last game of the season.
Exactly.
That's when you need to come on. But you just need to be not blown away by then. Or have
don't be 15-0 down in the first 15 minutes or anything like that.
Exactly right. And
even 15-6 would be better. Like, they did win that game, but they had to be bailed out to win it as well. And it's like it is going to keep biting them if they just aren't clinical. We saw this year how Wales made a habit of just not even dominating games. In fact, by some people's metrics, being dominated, although dominated is a misnomer that is constantly applied to possession. It's just the team had 60% possession. They're dominating. They can't do anything.
But to be fair, the Wallabies were doing bits. They were opening things up. They just need to make some adjustments. Like, Rennie's play is extremely romantic, but they do need to have support players hit the offensive breakdown.
And that's partly what Swinton's in there to do, I think, is just obliterate rucks for them and get quick balls outside.
Just like, you can be a support runner, but once the tackle is made, that adjustment has to be quick, and they need to work a better technicality into the cleaning out of the breakdown as well. Like, they were a little sloppy. The French are big over the ball. They won't be having Dante, but they do like to get their hands through it. And I would just say as well that some of the Wallaby carriers, like, they're very frantic. I love the pace they put on the ball. Like all Rennie teams, the Chiefs and even Glasgow before them, they come sprinting onto the ball, and it's fantastic, and they've runners coming in. But sometimes they just kind of jump recklessly into contacts and leave the ball there to be taken. Like, they just need to be a little smarter about how they're going to deck. If you're isolated, hold your feet for a little longer. Take a little bit off your spring, and then use it to hold your feet, turn your body back towards your own side, stretch your arms out, and that makes all the difference. Presenting clean ball to the scrum half, forcing the jackler to overextend.
It would be a very Redsian way of doing, because Tate will clear a ruck if it's clear for him, but if it's stuck in there, his rhythm's disrupted, and the chain just kind of gets upset further along the line. The French will be hungry for exactly that disruption. That's
little technical things like that are holding the Wallabies back. I still think they're very close to cutting loose.
They are. Really do. Like, if the passes stick, Corabetti could grab a hat-trick in the first 20 minutes, and that will be the ideal scenario for these Wallabies guys. Like, he still looks lethal and a lot to deal with, and he'll be opposite. Well, is it going to be Teddy Thomas or Pinot? I think it's Pinot again that he's going to be opposite on that wing.
You don't know. The French make up numbers.
Go either side. It could be one, could be the other. But if Corabetti has the ball in his hands, I'll back him to at least make some meters, if not a try. The plan can stay. You can stay to the romantic idea of the Rennie rugby. You don't need to change
just be
fundamentally the way you're playing
and improve the support play.
It's just little top 2 inches things, little things like the 3 points versus the corner, like the just staying in the mix,
like knocking on, not knocking on when a box cut comes to you, so when you spread the ball and score it counts.
All of those little technical things.
The other area is defense as well, that I just want to touch on, because I was watching back the game and I just thought some of the penalties that they gave up were really, really soft.
True.
Because France scored one try, which actually came off a loose pass of their own, and then they were pretty good in the scramble. But
happens a lot for France, though. That exact thing. A ball goes to deck and the line fractures.
Of course, but in their general multi-phase, they actually weren't opening the Wallabies up, and before they had a chance to say anything, the Wallabies were giving up penalties, and some of them were really stupid. They were offsides, they were sloppy high hits, they was just getting your hands in a ruck that they don't belong, and it was off slow ball as well. Like, there was one Gordon gave away where he just sprang up, and it was off slow ball that the French weren't doing anything with. And it was it boggled the mind, and every single one of them was punished by Jaminet, and that's just
the difference.
Just allowing them to chalk up points.
They lost the game by 2 points at home, so that's going to be sickening, and it should be a big part of the conversation. Is defend well, defend gamely. Like, be bullish. Obviously he was citing Swinton as a guy to model yourself on, even when he wasn't available for the first test, for just that hard-nosed edge, which you definitely need. But you need to keep the calmness in it. Like, you can, again, Cam as we were citing, like the best in the business, a guy who will monster you, will defend as well as anyone has ever defended in the most difficult position to defend, but dispassionately. Like, he won't be he'll keep an even keel even as he's breaking rib cages. You don't need to be hot-headed and give the French the ins that they will take. And
some of the penalties in the second half, as the French were really starting to open things up, they made a little bit of sense. They were like arguably good penalties where, like, the French looked like they were going to score a try, and then they just killed the ball,
turn that 7-pointer into a 3-pointer.
And that's when you can punish the French for being that religious 3-point team, is if you're scoring tries at the other end and then you give away a sly penalty and France just robotically kick 3 as they do. But then they kind of chalked off the idea of that being a good play.
Too many,
just giving away bad ones.
Like, as much as, like, the one
they kicked 7, like
indeed. Well, like the one where they streak away through Wokey and then Villiers and then Kuyu, and they go from their own goal line to your 22, and then they managed to not concede the try. They did give away a few penalties. Those are all fine. Like, you're in scramble mode. Your hefty men are still panting and chasing their way back into the defensive line. Kill that ball. That's a professional foul. It's a clever one. That's something that the best teams will do, and it was a good sign for them. But things like the middle third, France on just nothing. There's it is in kicking range by fractionally, like, it's outside the 45. It's in that zone where nothing's going on, especially if you're France and you're moving it slowly. So just don't be the first team to blink. And it's just a sign of being naive and a little bit young, which is exactly what this Wallaby side are. But with that youth comes excitement, and if it can stick for them, if they can kind of dust off a few of those top 2 inches, as well as keeping the pace high, keeping what true to themselves. They don't need to engage in a slow kicking duel with France.
Attack from the middle third, but just mind the breakdown. That's the key adjustment. And then also Tubo to come on should resolve any issues they have.
And Philip and all of this, and Valentini, big weight on the bench.
And I rate Swain as well. I rate Swain to do the Philip job, to disrupt that line out.
I think he'll be very good at offensive mauling as well. He's a Brumby after all.
Yes, indeed.
So it's minor adjustments, but they do need to be made, because the France will punish them if they are a little bit off the pace like that, as we saw last week.
And hold your line if the French throw a loose pass. Don't beeline for the ball, because they'll pick it up and
time.
get it.
Ireland have coughed up tries that way. It's very easy to do. Like, everyone's all organised until the ball goes down, and then it's like, oh, I'm after it. But France are so good at that exact scenario. It's like, now it's unstructured play. Haha.
Exactly. Checkmate. Exactly. So they just need to be careful. But they should be in good stead, the Wallabies. From the French point of view as well, they obviously need to start well.
Fast start is pretty pivotal to France. Whatever form they take, whatever personnel are there, they like to be fast starters. They like to hit the ground running, and they like to blitz teams in the opening quarter, and then kind of hold on. They sometimes do kind of go into Klingon mode from there.
I did think it was impressive the way that they, from 13 all, or whatever it was, 16-13 or in and around there, they just kicked their way back out to 25. But this was a win that was built on defence. This was the Edwards defence and chalking them up a win, and I think so it has to be again. I mean, the Wallabies, as I say, they're Dave Rennie team. They're going to stick to what they do. They're not going to adjust too much apart from in those areas. I still think the French should be looking to make a dog's dinner of the breakdown. Make everything sloppy.
Well, they picked the back row to do just that. In terms of Shalanch, Cretan, Wokey, hands in everything, big physical athletes will go all day.
Make the ball slow, rough up McDermott. The defence can still win them the game as it
can. McDermott can be lovely when in flow, and the Reds can be lovely to watch. But you can see when pressure comes on, you saw in some of those Super Rugby Trans-Tasman games, when their breakdown is disrupted, that he becomes a frantic little halfback, same as everyone else in that scenario. So it's like that's step one if you're France, is just create that picture of a kind of frazzled and a bit frantic McDermott, as opposed to a quick kind of rhythmic one, which he is lovely when he gets that flow going, and so are Australia when they get moving like that. France are in rhythm disruption mode and just ruck destruction mode as well. that's what they've done really well in this series. It's been a big difference. Like, the teams are pretty well matched, but France have had the edge in that area, and they look to do so again.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the defense is huge. If they can to disrupt the tempo, take the tempo away from them, slow tackles, that'll be massive.
Yeah.
The other key matchup, just the oh, sorry, what am I saying? You know what? I'll go from the other key matchup again. Amount of edits are crazy. The other area on defence that they also should be looking at is the defensive line out. I know Wokey had a couple of poaches. Like, I was thinking from an Aussie point of view, like, stay away from that maul. It was killing you. Just don't.
Yeah, with Swain there, I think they will go to it.
I don't think they will as much. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll persist with kicking to the corner and do that jazz. But I think they might be trying to go off the top, and I think Wokey could be a key man to stop them from doing just that. Taking away the Wallaby set piece launch plays is such a massive thing.
It's
I don't see them taking away the scrum, but I do potentially see them taking away the line out, and that's where Wokey and Jay Launch and these athletes, even Cazot, come up and steal those balls and make an absolute nightmare of it. Could be the winning of the game as well.
Yeah, it's key. It unravels anyone's plan, because even the most exciting team will build it off first phase balls. So all of the chat midweek is about, like, we're gonna hit this, we're gonna do this move in this scenario, we're gonna do this move off this line out. If you can just stifle that at source, it's stopping them at source. It means that the whole script is now moot, and it means you're kind of leaving the opposition to kind of make it up as they go along. Certainly when you half spoil them all and it doesn't get to set up and it goes to deck, that's set piece gone. You know, the first phase gone, the line, no gap between the lines, no plan from here. You're just going to hit it up and try and get a multi-phase going. But it's such a key thing, and it's been a really good weapon in this French team's arsenal. And with guys like Wokey and athletes like that, and then even McAloo and guys who've been good at that as well, they have a wealth of talent in terms of guys they can roll out who can do line out work. Their back row, all of their back row, are very good in the air. Yeah. So it's a key area for France, as it always is. Scrum time as well. Like, Demba Bamba showed what it's about in the last.
He's going to have to bring it again against Bell, because I can tell you that Wackler really struggled with Tupou on the first showing. Yeah, that's probably going to happen again, and I think, best case scenario,
want to see the two tight heads coming clean through on either side, and I suppose reset.
Yeah, exactly. The best case scenario for France is solidity during the first stanza, and then Bamba comes in and Tupou comes in, and both of them get an edge, and it's kind of messy. Like, I if they could lock it down, it's a result. I don't see them necessarily going on top as they did in the last test. I think Tupou coming off the bench is a better balance for the Wallabies, and does just sort of deals with that really well, and allows them to have that 30-minute explosive performance. Yeah. On offense, like, they're definitely missing Dupont as much as they could,
and Vakatawa and the like, in terms of their razzle dazzle in the midfield.
Even more so, I think. Like, Kuyu is great kicker of a ball, but Dupont is the tempo setter. He's the danger.
He's the exact heartbeat of their offense, and it works really well for them. And he's an exceptional player.
Exactly, and they're struggling a little bit for the lack of him, for the lack of Fiku and these guys. They do need to. I think it needs to be the forwards. I mean, there was a good moment, I think, when barrel-chested Barlow, as you call him, bashed through the middle of a Wallaby breakdown, and then just got his hands free. I think to Wokey.
Little quick tight passes amongst the forwards.
Taufi Fanua get through a contact, get it off,
which he was doing off the bench last week as well. Yeah,
break up the game with little forward carries and have forwards running off each other.
Yeah. And then there might be a bit of space for either Pinot or Toma, and if there is a little bit of space for either of those guys, they'll take the try. So
I'm sure. I don't think one try will win the game for them this week. So they do need. Now that said, part of the reason they only scored one try is because every time they got in the 22, they had an easy 3, and they took that option.
The Wallabies, if the Wallabies clean up their discipline, maybe they score more tries because the Wallabies haven't already made their decision for them. Exactly. So you never know. But it's finally poised either way, because we've had 2 results so far, one go either way, both of them 2-point margins, so like there's not even an aggregate difference between the teams at the moment. It's tight as it can possibly be, and yet stylistically it's interesting.
There's a yin and a yang. One team is more defensive, one team dominated the ball and lost last week out, which is the Wallabies, and it'll be interesting to see. I'd be interested to see if the French can punish them on transition as well. If they get a couple more clean poaches, can they go the distance off one of them? That could be the breaking of the game as well. There's so many game breakers on both sides of the field. Teddy Toma, but then that Wallaby bench to come on, Corabetti on one wing alone. There's that, so it's it's going to be a special game again. How do you see it, Ronan?
It's a tough one to call, isn't it? Like the part of me thinks France have looked a better team over the 2 games so far. The other part of me thinks there's some weird juju in Suncorp that just sees the Wallabies home most of the time, and it certainly did in Test 1. They had no right to win that test, but it did. So I'm flipping. Do you know what? I think it'll almost certainly be a 2-point margin, but for whom, I don't know. I'm literally flip flopping on this. I'm gonna say that the Wallabies get it done this time.
Yeah, I actually, unfortunately, for colour's sake, I'm not going to say France, because I had in my mind that I was going to say the Wallabies as well.
Okay, well then I'll say France get it done.
Well, you can't, use me like a puppet, my friend. I'm going to say what I think, and I think that the Wallaby bench against the French bench debutants might be a difference maker, and I'd be happy to be proven wrong if the debutants come on in our class and it's just a fresh crop of French talent to choose from. But I do think
D team now.
I do think the Wallabies are like a few passes away from scoring tries, and maybe it just doesn't happen for them. But I think it should and will with this. The few adjustments they've made are positive adjustments.
Yeah. Well, Tamua's out, Nikitau's in, which was what we were calling for. Yeah. All of these are good. Wright, who it hasn't been happening for, is now out.
And Dungunu in, he's lethal as well.
Yeah, so I think they've identified some of the things that have gone wrong accurately.
And I want to see Rennie Ball work at this level as well. He's one of my favourite coaches, and I love watching his teams play.
If he plays all the ambition, 60% possession again for the Wallabies, and a slight loss due to the defensive chops of their opposition
and clinicality that the French have over the Wallabies for sure. They need to. Wallabies just too easy to play against from a defensive point of view. If they're like, they can't be just giving up penalties and giving up meters. Lockie Swinton needs to come in and change that and be more physical. That is for sure. I don't know if it'll happen, but I think it probably will. I think they'll make the adjustment. They'll mix it in the first half, and then they'll pull away in the second. And
it'll be more than 2 points, you reckon? Then
maybe it's the end. It's funny how often in June away from home the Northern Hemisphere teams run out of steam by Test 3, and I just think that might be the case here. I think I would predict a Wallaby win to stop the rot of Test series defeats. A Wallaby win by about 7 points, that kind of range.
Okay, I'll take the just under on that. I'll say 6, but maybe 5.
Yeah, that's more sporting.
Why not? But something that's kind of how I see this one going. Open to being proven wrong. I still think it'll be a great test either way.
Yes,
it's just
both teams will have their moments.
Not be, and it's been fantastic so far. So looking forward to that one this weekend. Thank you very much for tuning into the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell as well so you'll be notified when we upload. But mainly drop a comment down below as well. We love hearing your thoughts on the rugby. Cheers.